So what's been driving this reduction in costs, and we see this is from a Lawrence Berkeley report called Tracking the Sun, which is available on the online learning course. This is plotting the total install cost. So this isn't material price, this is bottom line cost, everything included, taxes, labor, everything. So this is the price, for the end user to have PV installed. And you see that back about 5 years ago, we were around $7 or $8 per watt. But today, this ends in 2012. It was showing, $5 per watt or less, and it continued to fall throughout 2013. So if we want to kind of gain some insight here, what we notice is that for the most part, over the past, say, 5 years, reductions in the install price have been driven largely by reductions in the material costs, namely the price of PV modules. So we saw that about 4 years ago, or about 5 years ago, 2008, the cost of the module was around $3.50 per watt. In 2009, it started to fall significantly, and those reductions in price continued until by 2012 we were right around $1 per watt, and then going into 2013 and still today, you can now find a lot of modules and high quality modules for well under $1 per watt. We see a lot of pricing for 70 to 80 cents per watt, and that's led to steep reductions in the price. There's a little bit more at work as well, and this yellow dotted line shows what we call the implied non-module costs, and that would be cost of things like labor and permitting and overhead and customer acquisition, things like that. So those costs have come down a little bit, but most of the big reductions in the installed cost of solar have been thanks to falling module prices. One thing that's starting to change, though, is now in 2014, we're probably not going to see modules get any cheaper over the next 12 months or so. Most of the forecasts say that our PV module cost at the end of this year is not really going to be any different than it was at the beginning of this year. So in terms of how we continue to drive down costs from here and expand the market, it's really about addressing some of these non-module costs, what we call soft costs in the industry. And we'll be spending a lot of time in the coming weeks, talking about this specifically, because this really gets down to the crux of what solar technical sales is all about, is getting systems installed, acquiring customers, designing systems, and getting things built and moving on to the next customer as quickly and efficiently as possible to kind of create the most value. One significant thing to note, though, we were looking at the median install cost for the entire United States. Amongst the states, there are huge differences between the installed cost of solar. It's not all one rate out there, and I'm kind of happy to report, I guess, that Texas, you can see, is down here at the bottom end. So this was 2012 installation costs. So this wasn't last year, this was the year before last. Texas had a median installation cost of just under $4 per watt. And certainly in 2013 it came down even further. We're probably closer to $3 per watt than $4 per watt throughout Texas. The one thing you notice is that through a lot of the states it's still relatively high. For example, California, back in 2012, was still seeing about $5.70 per watt, although a lot of progress was made in the past year, in 2013. Average install prices in California last year were starting to get under $5 per watt. So there's big differences in between the states, and depending on a lot of different factors: the cost of doing business, the cost of labor, permitting, incentives available in the area. And the question is, how do we go from here? How do we go from around $4 or $5 per watt to, $2 or $3 per watt, which is what we might see as we get into really, truly, grid parity territory over the next few years? Can we even get there, given the material prices that we have, given kind of the state of the industry and the state of PV technology? Well, I'm happy to report that not only can we get there, but somebody already has gotten there. And if we look, for example, at Germany in particular, and this is a country which has been doing a lot of solar for a long time. Germany's been pushing hard on solar for the past 10 years, actually, going back to about 2004, and really pushing hard in the past 5 years. Germany has about 35 gigawatts of PV capacity installed, compared to the U.S. having about 13 gigawatts. And that's a country that is significantly smaller, both in area and population, than our own country. So per capita, nobody does more solar than Germany. And it shows here because their average cost of installing solar is dramatically lower than the average cost here in the United States. And one thing to keep in mind is that, again, these are actually 2012 numbers. In 2013, the cost of modules continue to fall. So in Germany, it's actually gotten even cheaper to install solar. In fact, it's not unheard of in Germany to get a residential installation at about $2 per watt, which actually is the U.S. Department of Energy sunshot goal. So Germany today is doing with normal PV technology that we all have access to what the Department of Energy can only dream of us doing maybe in another 5 to 7 years. So one thing we'll take a look at when we get into the cost and economics portions of the course is how is Germany doing this? But we'll kind of take a quick peek at one specific aspect of installation costs in Germany versus installation costs here in the United States. And that's what we call the so-called soft costs. So again, this is actually pulling back here, this was looking at 2011. They did this survey between German and American installers. So in 2011, the average U.S. installation cost was about $6 per watt. At the same time in Germany, it was about $3 per watt, or about half as much to install solar in Germany versus in the United States. So they looked at the breakdown, and the first thing they wanted to look at is, are the Germans getting cheaper modules than we are? And no, they're not. They both cost about the same. The next question was, are the Germans spending less on inverters? And the answer was yes, a little bit, but that doesn't really explain the difference. What they really looked at were what we call soft cost, or soft balance of systems, and the profit. And that's really where it came in. And these are what we call soft costs. They include things like labor, sales, marketing, design, inspection, permitting, interconnection, customer acquisition, all of these other things that go into making an installation happen. Here in the United States, these costs are very big because we're still sort of moving up the learning curve. In Germany, where they're a lot more solar savvy, their customers are a lot more solar savvy, they've driven these costs way down. So not only are the installers more efficient and getting things done with less man hours, but they're making a much leaner sales effort as well. It's a lot more cut and dry there in Germany. The customer and the installer have a very brief conversation. They say go, the project goes into place, and they move on to kind of the next project.